watching the countdown. Here we go. All right, calling the meeting to order. Joni, have you taken attendance?
Not yet.
Okay.
Trustee Campbell?
Here. Oh, we do.
Trustee Hadley? Trustee Kleinman?
Here.
Trustee Leha? Trustee Solomon?
Here.
Trustee Silva? Trustee Trudeau?
Here.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. So next up, we have the oath of the appointed board member.
She has been administered the oath.
Excellent. Okay, approval of the agenda, but first I would like to move to amend the agenda. So we have on here, let's see here, somewhere,
Item F,
item F.
new business.
New business, board, budget and finance committee appointment, and I would like to do that next month once we actually have more of our budget and finance committee in attendance. So can I get a motion to amend the agenda to strike item F?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great, thanks. All those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? Okay. Agenda has been amended. Now can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? Great, okay. Agenda is approved. Next up, I need approval of the consent agenda, which is just the usual things, minutes and disbursements. Sorry, everyone. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed? This is so, like, tight with just 4 people. Okay. So we have an agenda, consent agenda. Next up is citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments?
No citizens' comments.
Okay. Moving on to the financial report with Eli.
All right. So your financial report begins in the packet on the page labeled 24. And just to draw your attention to a couple items here. So as of the end of January 2024, we have received 99.98% of our budgeted revenue. That's exactly where we expect to be. It'll continue to trickle in. We'll probably, because we're already almost at 100%, we'll probably finish the year a little over 100%. Because a lot of those aren't necessarily predictable, particularly grants and memorials, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Our general fund balance, our undesignated fund balance, is $9.683 million as of January 31st. So we do have an agenda item tonight to move some of the money from the general fund balance into the capital fund. Year-to-date expenditures are 53% of budget after 58% of the fiscal year. That's where we like to be. So far, that's $11 million. And the same items, we'll talk about this if you'll skip to page 29. Here we are at 58.3% of the way through the fiscal year. So on the revenue side, it's always nice when those are above that. That means things have come in faster than usual. I want to particularly draw your attention to grants and memorials, which is at 121% of budget already. And that's mostly because we did not budget to receive very much revenue from the Friends this year. And we've received some revenue from the Friends. In fact, they gave us $25,000 in January. So thank you very much to the Friends of the Library. It's always much appreciated. And so that is running ahead of schedule. So overall, at 58% of the year, we've received 60% of our expected revenue. Now, if we look at the expenditure side, anything that's above 58% is running a little hot. So you can see salaries and wages running just a little ahead, even though overall employment is pretty much right on the money. We will likely have a small adjustment to that at the end of the fiscal year. As a reminder, when this budget was approved, it was before we had negotiated our labor agreements. So that came in quite just a little bit more than we were expecting at the time of budget. So that will need some adjustment toward the end of the fiscal year. Other things, as we've been mentioning, accounting and audit, we wound up using our consultant more than we had expected, so that will have an adjustment. Same thing with building rental. We did make an error at the beginning of the fiscal year, which didn't properly include the full amount of the rent because of the way that has to be booked, with some of that being considered debt. The library has no debt, but the general accounting principles require the when you have entered into a lease, you are essentially committed to that payment, so you have to consider some of that debt service. So as a result of that, we'll make an adjustment later in the fiscal year to bring building rental back under where we expect. Our rental at this point is just Westgate Branch and the archives, which are currently on space on South Industrial. Other things worth mentioning, let's see, legal expense running just a little bit ahead. That has slowed way down, so that should come back in before the end of the year. One thing I love to see is that both our two biggest lines, programming and materials, are running pretty much right on target. Programming at 57% spent and materials at 59% spent. We like materials to be running just a little bit ahead because we can't really order anything in June at the end of the fiscal year, because if stuff comes in after July 1st, it creates a big accounting problem. So generally our ordering slows way down in June, only the things that we know will arrive before June 30th. So we always like to see that running a little bit ahead of schedule throughout the year. Postage is over, but it's a very small amount. Seminars, conferences, training, and travel is over, which I'm glad to see because we have not always been able to use all of that. So I'm glad to see staff are getting some training and going to some conferences and things like that. So that's wonderful. And our total expenditures overall, 53% of planned budget, 58% of the way through the year. That brings us to a current revenue over expenditures of about $1.4 million. And that'll change a little bit as we start having some more capital outlays as we are spending money on the plaza. But I expect that we will finish the year with a surplus. And that's the financial report. Any questions?
All right, thanks, Eli.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up is committee reports, starting with executive committee. At the executive committee meetings, we talked about things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So a couple of policies that we're going to be seeing tonight and the new committee appointments. And that's, I think, it for executive committee. Budget and finance committee.
We didn't meet.
Great. Moving on to the library report.
All right, so here comes the library report up on your screen. Here we are in February 2024. All right. So first I wanted to show you, because we're about ready to issue our annual report. This is a document we've been producing in a very similar format since at least 2006. So I was just going to let it scroll here as we go. It's a long document. This will be, the board has already received this in draft form. And then we will send it to our mailing list later this week so that everyone can see this. One thing that we will be changing for next year is I'll get into this in just a moment, we will start including e-circulation on this, which means checkouts of the e-books and e-audiobooks that require checkout. That will be something new that we will add in next year's fiscal report. Again, this annual report covers the period that ended in the end of June of 2023. So this is already closing in on a year-old information. But that's the way the cycle works because you can't submit this until after your audit has been completed. And then all of the places that we have to report this all have deadlines in January and February. So that's the time when that has all been taken care of. So the annual report is on the way. So let's look at some details from the annual report. We pulled together the past 5 years of annual report information to sort of kind of compare them and find a trend. So we have here, this is our checkouts, not checkouts and renewals. Because one thing that is, we are required to include renewals when we report checkouts to the state aid reports, because that is considered part of a circulation transaction. Most libraries have some sort of limits on renewals or limits of when you can. In our case, we don't. So when we report that number of circulation transactions, which appears in the annual report, 75% of those transactions are renewals, right? Now, it's still use of the collection. But a lot of places you can't check it, you can't renew it till your end of your loan period, whereas we allow it at any time. So some people renew all their things every day. And that's fine. If you can, that's no problem. We're not concerned about it, but it makes for a weird wrinkle with the stats. So what you can see here is back here in fiscal year 2019. The gray area is print checkouts. The green area is AV checkouts. That's DVD, Blu-ray, CD, as well as books on CD. And at the bottom is eCirc, where in this chart just includes Libby and Overdrive checkouts. So what you can see here is that AV has taken a big hit since 2019. It's less than half, about 40% of what it used to be. Print, however, has recovered very well. And we here The most recent fiscal year, we were within 13% of the 2019 number of checkouts for print materials. So print has recovered much more strongly, understandably, than AV has, because a lot of the story here is you're seeing the rise of the streaming industry. Particularly, if you didn't have a streaming service in March of 2020, you did by now, right? So a lot of people became streaming adoptees over that time. But really, a lot of this story is a slow and significant decline in the use of our material on disc, the DVDs and Blu-rays. Any questions about this chart? Okay, here is room use. So the blue section is self-bookings. That's when people book their own meeting rooms. The green section is room reservations. That's when partner organizations or other businesses use our meeting rooms. Almost all of those are partner organizations. It's very rare for a business to pay to rent a room at the library, but it happens occasionally. And then the gray is AADL events. So one thing that you can see is we're almost as many room bookings total. However, I want to point out, this does not include same-day bookings. And anyone who works because those aren't recorded, those are just written on the paper. Anyone who works at our branches knows there are a lot of same-day bookings, a lot of them. Like every day there's, each sheet has multiple ones written in there. But what you can see here is that we are doing a smaller number of events than we were doing before. One of the things that we realized was that we were really doing too many events in 2018, 2019. We were cannibalizing a lot of our own audience. And we've since become a lot more strategic, particularly in the summer, where either we are intentionally not programming against ourselves, or we are very intentionally programming against ourselves to try to break up the audience and make it manageable across multiple locations. So one thing that we did see is that back in 2019, our average number of attendees per program was right about 60. Now it's right about 70. So that's a significant increase to the number of attendees per program, which means more efficient programming, better use of library time and spaces, because you can see there's a lot of demand for use of our rooms. But you can also see that blue section there, we're much higher than 2019 in terms of the amount of room use going on. We've never had a number this high of self-booking meeting rooms. And again, that's not counting any of the same-day events. So that's going very well, just to kind of give you a sense of that. Then I wanted to compare our door count versus last year and then versus 2019. So first you have each location here, the raw number of door count. We have counters installed over the doors at every location. This is the number of entries, so you don't have to cut this in half. This is the actual number of times people came into the building. So downtown was up 53% over the prior fiscal year. That's still 35% lower than 2019, but moving in the right direction to be sure. And you can see going down that column, all locations have double-digit increases in their attendance between fiscal year 22 and 23. What's most interesting here is that Mallets has recovered the strongest, and Mallets is always a very busy place. They're within 13% of the 2019 peak, so that's great to see. Then one other thing I wanted to add down at the bottom is the number of new cards. We've never issued so many new cards as we issued in fiscal year 2023. Over 10,000 new library cards. That's a 24% increase over 2022 and 13% higher than our highest peak at 2019. So that's all great to see. Tells a story of, our usage is changing, but things are pointing in the right direction.
I have a question.
Please.
Do you think that the the pandemic, vestibule service maybe had an impact on how people are using shelf service now versus
I don't think so.
pre-pandemic?
Shelf service is a very niche service at this point. It was much more heavily used during vestibule service.
Sure.
But now it's like maybe 1 or 2 a week. So, maybe a little bit more than that. But it's a very small number of transactions, the shelf service, fill a bag for you.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, so I'm calling it the wrong thing,
Hold-
like
hold
hold
shelves.
shelves.
Oh, hold
Hold
shelves.
shelf. Do you think, pre and post-pandemic, the hold shelf?
It's an interesting question.
Now we have more lockers too, right?
Yeah, we've
Places.
added a bunch of lockers.
Because it's the difference of a bunch of people coming in the library
Yes.
versus a whole family requesting things and one person running in and picking up 8 things.
Certainly, people have discovered the hold system that we hadn't seen previously. Let me look at that for next time and see what the difference is in a volume of holds, if any. Overall, even before the pandemic, like, the amount of circulation that happened via request was usually 30 to 45%. So it's like, we were always very careful not to do too many decision makings based on hold volume, because it only that's only the things that people can't find on the shelf, right? And that a lot of the circulation, particularly for kids' material,
Sure.
happens off the shelf.
Right.
So, but that's an interesting thing. Will, it's a great question. We'll look at that for next month. Any other questions about this? Okay. So here's an event report for you. The Ann Arbor Fiber Arts Expo was Saturday, February 11th on Super Bowl Sunday. And we had 30 plus vendors in the lobby programming all day. And we had 4,141 people through the doors that day. That was a big increase over the previous year. It's only the second year for this event. So that was a real great success. And Heidi, who worked on this, is in here today. She's was one of our staff who worked on this event, was a presenter as well. Upcoming events, we've got AADL GameCon is coming up on April 13th. This is kind of a merge between last year's Game Design Expo and previous RPG Fest. Record Store Day is coming up on Saturday, April 20th at the Downtown Library. Then Gardening and Farm Fest, that's a combination of our DIY Fest and the CSA Fair. That's happening on Sunday, April 21st downtown, so going to be a very busy weekend at the library coming up in late April. And so in the community, I wanted to catch you up on our releases for Ann Arbor 200 so far. So far we've had 15 releases. I'm just going to touch on them each real quick. So our first one, number 1, was the logo annotated. That shows the way that the original indigenous trails were transformed into the street grid of Ann Arbor. And you can see actually the Allen Creek running down there alongside, where the top road is Miller, the middle is Liberty, and the bottom is, what is the bottom one? It's Miller, Miller and Huron and Liberty are those three. So, and then release number 2 was the Ann Arbor Observer, the entire thing, every issue. It's really great to look through. You can find that at aadl.org/Ann Arbor Observer. Release number 3 was a podcast interview with the Chenille Sisters, a longtime musical act here in Ann Arbor. Number 4 was released on MLK Junior Day, and that was examining the Second Baptist Church's MLK Junior March that they had been doing since long before it was a federal holiday. So we had a piece that was released about the history of that march for MLK Day with a bunch of photos from over the years. Number 5 was a set of photographs by Rick Coco comparing historic photographs to the same thing at this time. You can see both those photos down on the website. Down on the second floor right now, as well as on the website. You can have the slider and slide back and forth between the two photos. And we are working on an exhibit of these at the art fair this year by invitation from the Street Art Fair. Number 6 was a podcast interview with Jerry DeGreek, who is one of the LGBTQ and city councilors. Was not LGBTQ when he ran, but did come out as during his term and talking about that experience along. And he was serving at the same time as Kathy Kozashenko, if I remember correctly. Number 7 was the history of the Ann Arbor Airport. Ann Arbor Takes Flight. One of my favorite things about this is the Flo School of Flying from Captain Flo, Leonard Flo. And I did make sure that the archives worked into this article the phrase Flo flew, because how can you just leave it there, right? So Flo was a great flying instructor. Number 8 was an interview with David and Linda Siglin, the original instigators and still proprietors of the Ann Arbor Arc. So that had a great lot to say about all the years that they've been managing that venue. Number 9 is Karen Jania. She is director of the current president of the Washtenaw County Historical Society, and she was a longtime reference librarian at the Bentley, talking about her experience with history in town. Number 10 was the release of our film, There Went the Neighborhood, produced in partnership with 7 Cylinder Studio. We calculated at this point about 5,000 people have seen the film, so that is continuing to grow, and we're planning a screening at the Downtown Library in April for people who missed the first one, as well as the entire student body of Community High School is going to be watching the film as well. So that's all in process. Number 11, released on Valentine's Day, Looking for Love in A2, talking about this specific photo is from an early mid-60s computer dating service that was established in Ann Arbor, one of the first computer dating services in the U.S. Number 12 is an interview with Peter Stipe, who's a member of the Ann Arbor Police Department and grew up as in his words, I believe, a troubled youth in Ann Arbor, and then became one of the police department's most decorated officers. Number 13 is a documentary we produced about Wild Swan, and that's called Theater for All, and it's a really lovely documentary about their productions over the years and their efforts to have truly inclusive theater in Ann Arbor. for all sorts of different audiences. And number 14 is Ann Arbor's lost poet, Charles Henry Schumann, who was enjoyed quite a bit of notoriety nationally and toured during his years of activity, and is a very interesting story. So there's a bunch of his poems there and stories about his visiting other towns, all that we found in the newspapers. And most recently, just today, we released this interview with Steve Adams. Steve grew up here in Ann Arbor. He was a longtime Borders employee. I think he worked at the Del Rio as well. Just had a lot of great Ann Arbor stories to tell and had a really great interview. So those are the 15 projects that have been released so far. Many more to come. We got a lot of things in the hopper, some exciting meetings coming up, and that's all on the way. Here's our staff's.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if someone wanted to find all 15 of these things?
Yes. You
Where
just go
would
to
they go?
aedl.org/Ann Arbor 200.
Okay.
Yep, just type out Ann Arbor 200. It's also right on the front page of our website, and you can find all 15 of them there. Okay, so here's our staff spotlight for this month. This is Mara Abru. She's a book pro. She currently works at the downtown library. She's been at AADL for 6 years. What do you wish people you worked with knew about you? I was born in Venezuela, where I was studying to become an English teacher. I worked there as an ESL teacher, which opened great opportunities for me. These took me to places like Germany and Spain, where I lived and got to meet great people while doing what I love. Eventually, I settled in South Africa, where I lived for a while. I've been in Michigan for 8 years, and I'm in love with its beauty, its people, and its way of life. I've always taken every opportunity life has given me, and I'm grateful to be a part of AADL, where I've met such an array of wonderful people. I'm that lucky person who always meets the best people no matter where I go. AADL to me is a safe place of learning, a place of fun, a place to just be. I love my team. I love what every person brings to the table. I'm forever grateful to have this opportunity in my life. We spend more of our waking hours here together than we spend with our families, so I think it feels like we become a family in a way. Thank you, Mara. Mara does a terrific job here. All right, mention of the month from our own city clerk on Instagram. In addition to all the amazing things AADL has to offer, Ann Arbor voters can vote early at Westgate, Traverwood, and Malletts Creek branches through February 25th. This just wrapped up, and it was very successful. It was great working with the clerk and her staff. Len took point on that and arranged all of that. We are a polling place at the downtown library tomorrow, but we have established already with the clerk that for the August and the November elections, we'll be offering early voting at the same 3 locations, Westgate, Traverwood, and Malletts Creek. They really have a nice triangle around the town. And we'll be moving them to slightly different spaces than they had been in the building. But it will mean the interruption of library program, even at the August event. Normally very busy time for us, but there's nothing more important that happens at the library than this. So we want to make sure to make all the space for this and make this as easy as possible. While we don't expect the August election to necessarily be very busy, we do expect the November election to be very busy. So that will be coming up. And thanks to Jackie Baudry and everyone at the city for working with us on that. We're very happy to be the home for early voting at the library. Okay, here's our compliment of the month. I wanted to tell you how much I've appreciated AADL programming in the past months, especially in the arts. I attended the artist talk by ceramic artist Ibi Baralaye in connection with the UMA exhibit of old Edgefield potters at the downtown branch in the fall. I sent the video link to artist friends. We all felt renewed and refreshed by his talk. I also enjoyed the live stream of Keegan Rogers pie making at Westgate and passed that link along to friends. Having a live stream is great, as sometimes I make that last minute decision that I don't want to go out after all. The recent lecture, A Brief History of Knitting, at the end of Fiber Arts Sunday was superb. It was of the caliber of the lectures that I had as a textile design major in art school. Educational and inspiring. I'm looking forward to the fiber workshops in March. All to say how much we appreciate AADL's innovative and community-oriented programming. Jill Peak. And she added this onto an email where we were talking about something else completely different. So that's a wonderful experience that we have quite often, where people are like, oh, by the way, can I tell you how much I love the library? So, of course. Here's our complaint of the month. This one's just from this morning. Older male patron came to the desk and stated that they wanted to make a complaint. They asked if this was a library or a daycare center, and that they had to circle the parking lot 5 times to find a parking space just to come in and get a book. I apologized and explained that it was a baby play hour, and they said they knew that, but they were unhappy that it was every morning. Well, it's not every morning. We have baby play group once a week. We have 2 preschool story times during the week. We also have the English language conversation group, and there's a couple other regular weekly morning programs, but there is no daily program at the library. But this is something we hear often. Nobody goes to the library anymore. It's too crowded. So that was a comment that we received, and that's my report for this month. Any questions?
I'm looking forward to some democracy-related puns when there's summer game codes during the August voting. Okay, so thank you, Eli. That was library report. Moving on to old business, Parkland Plaza facility upgrade update with Len.
Good evening, everyone. Last month I was told no one could hear me. So, not a lot has happened. I think last month I mentioned we were working on the paper vault ceiling. That's now been, I guess, fixed. We've decided on a solution, but we do have the insulation drywall going up. Some of the painting's been done. Our major new electrical room in the facility is complete. The IT closet is getting close to being done. And the space we have in the front, where the friend's shop will be, the ceiling grid's in, the lighting's in. It's pretty much ready for paint and carpet, so it's coming along. But the paper vault, and really the reason we're in the building is it pushes back probably a couple weeks, but all in all, it's going well. Any
Great.
questions?
And we'll talk some more in just a few moments about the resolution to amend the budget.
Okay. So we'll just dive right into that then. So moving on to new business, we have the resolution to transfer from the undesignated fund balance to the capital fund. I will read the resolution. The board resolves, 1, to transfer $2.5 million from the undesignated fund balance to the capital fund. 2, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, great. Discussion.
So just to set this up, we had talked during last year's budget cycle about the possibility of taking last year's ending surplus and moving it into the capital fund. Once the audit was complete, we knew exactly what that was. So at the end of the completion of the audit, that number was $2,500,000 and like $69,000, something like that. So most of that was because when we set that year's budget, we put a large amount of money in capital outlays to be able to pay for equipment at the plaza, and then the plaza was not ready to receive any equipment. So about more than half of that was due to us having a plan to spend capital money that then didn't get spent. The capital fund is a great place to put that because it's not tied to any particular year. Also, now that our fund balance is closing in on $10 million, that's at a point where it's getting a little high for something that you don't have any plans with what to do with it. They say for a large organization, you want to keep between 25 and 33%, between a quarter and a third of your annual operating expenditures in your fund balance. Like, that's a healthy fund balance. More than that, it's too much. Less than that, you might get stuck. So with this brings us down to about 30% of our annual budget, because this will bring us down to about $7 million on a $20 million annual budget. So this is staff's recommendation. Could be more, could be less, but this is our recommendation of what the transfer from the undesignated fund balance to the capital fund should be.
Makes sense to me.
Great. So if there are no questions or discussion, let's take a vote. All those in favor, say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes. And we will make that transfer. Next up, we have a resolution to amend the construction budget for Parkland Plaza. So I will read the resolution. 1, to increase the Parkland Plaza construction budget by $620,000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope.
That's just prior version of the checklist. This
Oh,
is the number there.
Sorry. Increase the budget by $734,087.64 to a total of $4,439,891.83. 2, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded. Can I get a motion? This resolution?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great. Len?
Yes, so the original resolution, or the original construction estimate for the plaza was $3,500,000, I think $173. The post-bid results were a little bit higher because of the geothermal HVAC was a little higher, some of the drywall and carpentry was a little higher, some of lines were under. So we had probably $260,000 over budget after the bid results from the construction estimate from the first resolution. Then we had full site plan approval with Salvo Township. There were administrative costs with that, with the architect, with the construction management company. There was the year lag between those approvals and us starting the project. So we committed to the steel and some of the bigger items, but inflation in that year for some of the smaller items you wouldn't purchase up front. There were increases there. One of the biggest increases throughout the project, though, was the fire suppression for the materials, for everything we're going to put there for the archives and protect it. The original construction estimate had that number at traditional fire suppression. We've done a dry chemical suppression and then a redundant water, supply water fire suppression. That's a $300,000 number in itself. So it added up. We've made some minor changes, normal change orders with build outs. But all in all, it turns into quite the number over a 2-year period. So, but this does correct it. It does, it kind of replenishes where our construction managers use some contingency funds to keep the project going, so.
Well, and you prepared us for this.
I
You know,
tried.
This was coming down the pipeline at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
So you can see in the packet here, one of the biggest single line items is what scope of work adjustments there, $442,000. And that's basically the things where the project was enlarged since it started, mostly through the requirements that emerged during approval. There's a lot of site work that we hadn't planned on originally. And then, when you vote to approve the bids and award the contracts, that doesn't automatically come with the change to the budget. So this is now bringing the budget up to the bids that were approved by the board, as well as with all our small change orders there were all kinds of little things. I remember there were heaters in the warehouse bathroom.
Yes,
One of the things is when we initially started the project, we weren't certain that we were gonna redo the walls and the ceilings in the front office period, but since then, that's become the space that the Friends are going to have their shop. So we wanted to redo the ceilings and the floors and the paint and all that stuff. That wasn't part of the original
there
scope.
was, and that's almost $60,000, but it's gonna be a space that we can move someone into, a space that we would move into. But Gail, I mentioned, there's some perimeter heaters for the bathrooms. There's some door hardwares that's like $800. There's half lights in doors in offices. We like to have windows in the doors so you can see when someone's in the office. First floor ceilings were missed, so we put drop ceilings in the offices in the first floor ceilings. And then the painting, there was a big change order in the painting. We couldn't get the stainless steel handrails, so we went with steel, and now you have to paint them all. So, again, it all kind of adds up.
But we're not anticipating further adjustments to this budget because this replenishes the contingency, so there's still room for things to go wrong. But also at this point, we're getting pretty close.
Yeah, we're at the point now where we're past anything that would be a big ticket item. The last thing we've been working on is the ceiling in the paper vault, and it's about it being zero perm, like no moisture in, no moisture out, and that's taken 2 months of back and forth to get the materials we wanted. But that's also included in here with the budget. So it does correct us, and I don't believe we'll need another correction.
Thanks for all your work on this.
Yeah, the main question I had coming into this agenda item was about what's falls under the scope of work adjustments line item, and I think you've addressed that. Yeah, so I'm good. Thank you. We're great.
All right, well, no other questions. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of amending the construction budget for Parkland Plaza, say yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed? All right, motion passes. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have one more.
Yeah, I see this now. Don't go anywhere.
You're still standing there.
Next up is our resolution to award contract to move the archives from South Industrial to Parkland Plaza. So we knew this was coming. Eventually, we would have to actually move the stuff there.
This is an exciting one.
It is a very exciting one. So the board resolves, 1, to award the contract for moving the archives from South Industrial to Parkland Plaza to Palmer Moving in the amount of $47,870. 2, that the expenditure be authorized from the capital fund. 3, that all resolutions and parts of resolutions that conflict with the provisions of this resolution are rescinded. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Seconded.
Great. Discussion. I think,
Well, this is the team that moved us from Green Road to South Industrial. We had a great experience with them. They move a lot of collections. They do a bunch of work with the University of Michigan. They treat our materials as if it's their own. And our archives manager enjoyed working with them. And to do this resolution now allows us to get on their schedule because we don't know what their summer schedule looks like with schools. So we'd like to be prepared for it and get something in the book so we can move.
So when do you think that's gonna happen?
I don't know, I keep answering this question. I would like to, I would hope for June. But it has a lot to do with our staff too, right?
Mhm.
We're moving a couple departments out there, and not answering for the departments. I think their work should dictate some of the move. Now, the archives might be a little bit easier, but we have 2 departments in the downtown building we're gonna move as well. But the site work will be done in May, so we can occupy the space. But I would shoot for June unless our archives manager feels different.
And we're not planning on using commercial movers for the non-archives part of the move.
Now, for the people moving from the downtown building to the Parkland Plaza, we've already met with the staff. There'll be new furniture, new everything out there, so it's just trips for us with their personal things and their main materials that we would move anyway, so.
great. Is there going to be any sort of fanfare when that move happens?
Not the move itself, but when the friends are ready to open their bookshop.
Yeah.
That will be a big splash, and we will likely have an idle equipment sale on the same day. And remains to be seen what else we'll come up with as soon as we have that scheduled.
Nice.
And I won't hold you to it, but when do you think that might be?
Early conversation was probably before or after the 4th of July. I would say probably after now,
Yeah.
but it would be a great time to, I think Events has their first summer date for programming out there. It's an event we did last year, and that's July 23rd. Oh, maybe before that.
It's exciting to see this come to fruition.
It is, and it's like our space now. It really is. It's turning into our space. It was just a beer and wine distributor. Now it's starting to turn into a library.
Yeah,
Yay.
that's so cool.
Being the newest member of this board, maybe just looking for a little more background or context on how this vendor was selected for the contract. I heard that there was prior experience, but were any other movers considered or?
I did not solicit other bids on this particular one. We typically do.
Okay,
This mover, we've used them several times, and the fact that they did move the archives the last time. They have the refrigerated truck for our film negatives. They know what to do.
Sure.
And they're pretty quick about it. But typically, yes, we would get multiple, but when it's a unique vendor like this and we have the long relationship, I really wanted to use these folks.
okay, thank you.
Great. All right, if there are no other questions, let's do a vote to, wait, I'm in the wrong place. Yep, to award the contract for moving the archives from South Industrial to Parkland Plaza to Palmer Moving. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Excellent.
All right, next up, we have an item of discussion, which is the draft land acknowledgement. How do we want to do this? Should I read?
Why
them?
don't I set it up a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we can read it out.
Okay.
So we began this project over the past summer, and we worked with a consultant, Lindsay Willow Smith, who is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Ojibwe, who was a University of Michigan student and had worked at the Clements and had also some experience in doing this kind of collective editing process, really. So we had, it was open to any staff member that wished to participate. Probably had 20. I mean, it was a large number. Maybe it was less than that, maybe 12. Yeah, somewhere around there, staff who chose to engage. And she led us through a process of several drafts. Everybody on the team wrote their own draft, and then we pulled it together into a further draft with the goal of having a statement that So you see here on your document, there's three pieces. There's the introduction, there's the land acknowledgement itself, and then there's the challenge. The land acknowledgement itself, the middle part, is the part that we are asking the board to approve as a policy once you have edited it. The staff who are involved in the project understand that the board approves these and will make edits if they see fit. We would then use the land acknowledgement part of it itself. We would have commission artists who are members of the indigenous community to make those into plaques to have alongside the other plaques in the vestibules of all of our facilities. And it would be read at the beginning of events that are related to indigenous culture or indigenous craft or art or music. They would not be said universally at the beginning of every event. It would not be said at part of the board meetings. It would not be put in email signatures or things like that. Part of our conversation with the consultant was that it's most impactful when it is used when it is relevant, as opposed to becoming like a rote thing that you do alongside turning off your cell phones, right? So this was positioned in that way. And so the next step really is to see what the board feels about it. And this is it's not being approved today. This is just sort of the first look, is the first time it has come before the board after the staff finished their process in January. One thing I want to mention is that one of the things we talk about in here is to pledge support for Anishinaabe art and literature and performance. One of the things that we plan to do is to establish basically an Anishinaabe Librarian Fellowship with the goal of being able to recruit and find someone who's a member of that community to help the library expand its collections, expand its program offerings, work with members of the community who are artists and scholars and performers, and really recognize the indigenous culture of the area and the living culture of the communities that are still a part of the area, very much so. So that's kind of what we, how we plan to move toward this pledge. But the three pieces here, the introduction and the challenge, would kind of like go alongside, like next to the pledge, next to the acknowledgement rather, and that this would all be on a web page of the library. Only that middle piece goes alongside our mission and vision statement, but there would be a page about the land acknowledgement that has all three pieces, as well as some information about other things going on related in the community. So that's sort of like it in a nutshell. So we should read it into the record as it currently states. I can do that unless someone else would like to.
You can do it.
Okay. All right, introduction. The Ann Arbor District Library is a public institution founded on Anishinaabe land, including the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi tribes, as well as the Peoria, Sac, and Fox, and Wyandot tribes, as seized through the Treaty of Detroit in 1807 and the Treaty of Fort Meigs in 1817. It is important to note that the indigenous peoples never left and continued to maintain relationships with the living lands. Inaccurate accounts of these lands state that they were empty until colonizers arrived. They were not. The library stands upon land violently and dishonestly taken from the indigenous peoples. These harms can never be undone. Land acknowledgement. The Ann Arbor District Library acknowledges that it has and continues to benefit from the colonization of indigenous lands. The library pledges to collect and highlight Anishinaabe art, literature, and performance through the support and recognition of Anishinaabe artists, writers, teachers, and performers. And here's the challenge. We recognize our duty to sit with discomfort and continue pushing ourselves to understand what this means. Please take a moment to reflect. What is your relationship with this land? What does it mean that this land was taken from its indigenous inhabitants? To acknowledge is a verb, a doing word. What should we do now? So, if anyone has feedback that they would like us to integrate for the next time we bring that forward, you don't have to send it right now or say it right now. You're welcome to email it later, give it some thought. But does anyone have any thoughts or concerns or feedback for staff about this?
And, I mean, I can kick us off, and just to sort of lay out the process. So we're talking about this tonight. We will talk about it again in a month, and then vote on it in April. So there will be time for the missing board members to talk about it some more. So there will be a process for us, as well as what happened for the staff. And the one thing that stood out to me was the word collect in the land acknowledgement. I think because of the connotations that it carries around museum collections more than library collections, with this idea of collecting of things from other people that are taken or stolen. And so I was thinking about maybe some words that are less loaded, like purchase, preserve, steward, that sort of mean more or less the same thing, but don't carry that, that connotation. So that was one suggestion that I will make at some point. We can make that change for when we bring it back next month.
Yep.
A technical question, are the different tribes grouped based on the history of the treaties?
Yes. First of all, the way that the order in which the three tribes of the Three Fires Confederacy are described is something that they settled in their own treaties. And then the Peoria, Sac, Fox, and Wyandotte were other tribes that were around this area in that time. But it was not seen as their area, was my understanding. We talked about this with the consultant. This was her recommendation of the way that this is formally recognized when you speak about this area.
Okay. I assume there was a reason why they were separated
Yeah,
out that
totally.
way. Mhm.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I have some thoughts. I think, first of all, I'm really happy that the library and staff have been engaging with this. I think it's important and not always very easy work to do. I just saw the draft for the first time after the packet went out, and yeah, I agree with the comments that Molly has made around the use of the word collect. I think for me, one area that I had questions about was the introduction, particularly the end of the introduction. So I think something that stood out to me is that towards the end of the introduction, the language becomes quite declarative in a way, you know, and so part of me was just trying to square like, okay, this is an acknowledgement, but there are portions of it that seem more like a declaration or a pronouncement. And I think when I took a look at other library policies already posted on the website, some of those are quite succinct, like the freedom of information policy, very, very short. Others are lengthier and provide more context. Like I think the privacy statement talks about assurances and intentions. Some of the other policies talk about how, like why the library is doing it or how the policy ties to the mission. So I think one question that I was curious about was whether there's value in tying a portion of this to like how this connects more to the library mission, vision, and values. And I do think there's relevance, like there are pieces in the mission, vision, and values around having literate and informed citizens, around sustaining the value of public library services, working together to reach goals, supporting or advocating access for all. So, you know, I think there's some of this work that ties nicely to those things, and whether or not that could be incorporated into the current draft is something to consider, but I don't have a position today on whether I think it's something we should do or not. I will say too, yeah, so some of the language in the introduction, inaccurate accounts of these lands state that they were empty until colonizers arrived. They were not. The library stands upon land violently and dishonestly taken from indigenous peoples. These are harms that can never be undone. Never is a pretty strong word, and there's part of me that feels some hesitation at like a number of people that sit on the board. I'm not a member of this underrepresented group. I don't have a good sense of how members of that community might feel about some of what's been said in the introduction, whether that represents their understanding of the truth that an acknowledgement is trying to get at. So just, I think as this moves forward to voting, it would be important to me that input, or that some amount of input or feedback from the peoples it's discussing was included. I think that's all I have for today. But again, none of this is to be overly critical. I'm super happy that this is being discussed and hoping to see it move forward.
Excellent, thank you.
So I'll just say I'm happy that we're wrestling with this, and I'm grateful for all the work that's already gone into it. It's clear we're doing this intentionally and carefully and in consultation with the people who have the expertise we need to be able to lock this down. I haven't had time to process this yet. I didn't review the packet, so I will definitely forward on any thoughts I have as I have some time to reflect on it. But thanks for all the work so far, and I do hear what everybody at the table said, and generally am in alignment and agreement with the feedback.
Great.
Okay,
Cool.
thank you all
right.
very much, very helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. This is really, I'm glad we're doing this as well. So next up, we have discussion of the sustainability statement, which we can do the same thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Sort of set the stage a little bit.
Sure, so this did not come from a staff process, I just wrote it. So, to give us a starting place to talk about, because this is much easier for everyone to engage with, and also a little bit easier to see where what it's trying to achieve, right? And because it had come up as we were specifically contemplating spending hundreds of thousands of dollars more on the plaza to have lower carbon footprint HVAC systems, that we didn't necessarily have a specific statement anywhere in our policy to guide that, other than responsible stewardship in a very broad sense, right? But it's easy to say, well, is it stewardship of dollars or stewardship of the atmosphere, or what is it that you're stewarding? So this is just a place to start, and again, we'll bring this to as many more meetings as the board would like to see it. But let me just read this here as what our starting point is. The Ann Arbor District Library recognizes the impact of its operations on the environment and challenges of adapting to a changing climate. AADL commits to careful consideration of the current and future environmental impact of its decisions, including energy use, plastic waste, and facilities development and maintenance. AADL uses its resources and knowledge to decrease emissions, waste, pollution, and consumption, while increasing reuse, resilience, and sharing in our community. AADL looks for and creates opportunities to make progress toward a more sustainable library and a more sustainable community. So I wanted to make sure that this was addressing multiple different facets of what is called sustainability, because it's not just about carbon footprint. Similarly, that it's not just about our operations, but also about the leadership that we show locally in the government sector, as well as for patrons. At the same time, I think it's an aspect of our community that a lot of our patrons are very engaged with this issue and have a lot of suggestions. Sometimes it can seem very simple, and in reality, it's much more complicated. So I wanted to make sure there was room for engineering realities alongside some of the aspirational objectives that you want to see in a policy like this. And primarily to make sure that it's not just not just deciding about the current expenditure or whatever is in front of the board, but that what its impact would be years down the line. This is not new to this organization. The Malletts Creek Library and all the libraries, the branch libraries, when we developed the Malletts Creek Library in 2004, LEED was still fairly new. We just chose not to pursue LEED certification because of the additional cost. But the building was built to be very close to LEED Gold at the time. So there was, we did a lot of life cycle analysis. The bioswales are very much not about carbon footprint, but about runoff and keeping a clean watershed. So just kind of continuing and formalizing the organizational commitment to care for the environment at the board level to guide future decisions. So that's as a starting place. And Molly we'd started an earlier draft of this, and we actually had a question because for the consultant we were working with on land acknowledgement. Because of the 7 generations concept, right? It's a nice way of framing it. But in conversation with her, it was like, that's not quite appropriate for this organization to use that when it's, the concept is very portable. So that's why you see this before you today.
Yeah, I like that you're encompassing the multiple facets. And I remember this came up when we were deciding about trucks as well.
Yes.
And not having something to point to, you know, really wanting to make sure that we're able to go back and have something like this on the books to sort of back up that decision when we are spending so much more on something, but that it is really you know, like that one, we had a really good conversation about like, okay, like this is driving around our city all the time and really high use, city use. So, yeah, I just think, that's all just to say, as a first pass, I like that it covers so much ground. And I think it's really important to get this on the books, you know, so that as we're making these changes and growth and new development and new facilities, we have a little, you know, guiding light.
I mean, the resilience aspect was a word I wanted to make sure to get in there, because I know we as a group had some heartburn about purchasing natural gas generators for the library. And I think we're all very glad that we did, because no other technology would have kept our doors open during this duration of power outages that have happened in the community. I mean, nothing else there is no technology that would keep us running for 5, 6, 7 days. So even though it meant new fossil fuel burning equipment, that was like I said, an engineering reality.
Right.
My first public comment before I was a trustee was coming to a board meeting to acknowledge, like, I understood why that decision was being made, but like just the disappointment that it had to be made.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I also appreciate it being framed as sort of looking for and creating opportunities for progress, and really acknowledging that, like, it's continual progress. It's not like we're just committing to like the most sustainable thing all the time, no matter what. Obviously, the reality needs to be there, but we will keep looking for those opportunities when we can make them happen.
Yeah, first impressions, I like this overall. I'm laughing inside that trucks got mentioned, because I'll admit that the first thing that came to mind when I read AADL uses its resources and knowledge to decrease emissions was, well, a truck is a resource and using it does not decrease emissions. So I think the only question on my mind was just that line and that sentence in particular, and whether anyone would push back against that with an example like trucks. So yeah, that's just the one piece of feedback I'll make is my brain also jumped to trucks.
Well, so the decision that we were making was about the library stuff truck that does the loop every day, which is nearing the end of its life, and to replace it with another internal combustion truck would have been around $70,000. To replace it with an electric truck, which would be the same truck but then retrofitted because you still can't get them new, was around $200,000. And we wrestled with it a lot. And we ended up going for the electric truck, which felt right.
We're expecting it within a month, within 2 months?
April 26th, it will be back in, I will see it April 26th, and the charger has been installed on the plaza.
It's very exciting. And the plaza's gonna have solar,
Well, at some
Eventually.
point, that's sort of like down the line.
right,
You know, we would love to at some point be able to charge the truck off grid.
Yeah.
We're a long way from that.
right. But there's a path.
Yes.
But so at the time, it was like, that's a big financial difference. And we are the financial stewards of the library, and without a policy to point to make any other argument, like it felt very uncomfortable. And I think I remember very clearly because it was that first week of smoke last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways that smoke made it easier to make that call for us. So I'm excited to have something that isn't an environmental catastrophe that will make it easier for us to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, that context is helpful. I think the point I'm considering is that I think there will always be something you could point to in the daily operations of the building and the legacy facilities and all the resultant equipment that someone could point to and say, this is not in line with the policy you've put forward. And so just thinking through how to frame that maybe that's the only thing I'm kind of keeping in mind.
I mean, in some cases, that's sort of, yes, the roads must roll, the truck needs to hit all the locations. Because if it didn't, people would be driving to all those different locations in their own personal cars to pick up the books that they wanted. You know, so in some cases, it's like our entire operation ultimately decreases the carbon footprint of the community, ideally.
Well, and all the things we circulate that people might otherwise buy individual, like that part felt very clear to me.
I mean, we've become, you know, we're a big part of the city's circular economy discussion. You know, we've been having a lot of those meetings here, and, you know, we are a major player in that part of reuse in the community, and, you know, from our idle equipment sales just to our average everyday circulation. You know, there's not really another organization that does as much reuse in the community. But you're absolutely right that, like, this will absolutely be used against us, particularly when it comes to particularly when it comes to facilities development. You know, from some perspectives, some people say the most sustainable building is the one that already stands, right? And while there's some elements of truth to that, it's also, there's a lot of compromises in the decades of mankind's material science folly that are built into every single building that's been around, and particularly ones that have been around since the 50s.
Well, and I think I would argue that the second sentence in that first paragraph is kind of, Lisa, getting to what you're saying, like, we're committed to careful consideration, right? Like, and maybe the start of the second paragraph could be a little bit more nuanced in, like, considering context of, you know, current demands or, you know, current necessities. But I do think I like that it's, you know, we're not committing to always pick the most perfectly sustainable thing every single time. We're committed to careful consideration of the impact on, you know, on our decisions.
Maybe one quick point of clarification. I think, so the previous discussion was about a land acknowledgement, and this one is a sustainability statement, and we talked about policy on the website. And so, can you give me a quick,
Yeah.
like, so I was like, if we were to vote on this, you know, in a future meeting, like, is that
Yes.
how are we defining those three things?
Because if the board votes on it, that makes it policy.
Got it.
So this would go on the page with the vision and the values and the mission statement.
Okay,
So it's like, it's on that level, those are board-controlled documents, similarly with the land acknowledgement. And the thought
Okay.
is that both of these would appear on that page, which is outside the numbered policy manual, right? But they are still board-approved statements of position.
perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Great question.
Great. So we'll bring this back next month and then probably vote on it in April also. So great. Thanks so much, Eli, for your work on this.
Sure.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. So we are skipping Budget and Finance Committee appointments. We're going to do that next month. And then next up, we have the establishment of the Facilities Committee and appointment of committee members. So Eli, do you remember?
Sure, so we talked a little bit earlier about what the charge would be. The bylaws say that each created committee needs to have a charge. And so the charge for a facilities committee would be to examine the current and future needs of the library's facilities and determine accordingly.
So that's the idea for the Facilities Committee. Has there ever been one like this, been one before?
Yes, well, it's like during the years when we were building the branches, the facilities committee was the board committee that, you know, took the meetings with architects and all that sort of but also even before that, the facilities committee met with the consultants who were doing studies of how many square feet of library you should have per capita, and how many square feet of library the library system needed, and all those sorts of things. So it's, facilities committee is is the most common formed committee for us to have over the years.
Cool. So I would like to appoint Lisa, Scott, and myself to the Facilities Committee. Scott, how do you feel about being chair?
Sure, yeah.
Thanks. I just realized we hadn't talked about that piece. So, any other thoughts or discussion about serving on this committee? You two are okay with being on the committee?
Yeah, I'll note I'm super excited about facilities. When Scott, at one of the previous meetings when my appointment was being discussed, it was noted that I had some prior experience with facilities or construction of new facilities, but my past experience also includes working with libraries and other organizations on space utilization studies, minor remodels, renovations, new construction, buying furniture. So, it's not the primary focus of my job, but it's something I love to nerd out about, and just very excited to engage on that.
Awesome. Great. Cool. So can I get a motion to approve the Facilities Committee appointments?
So moved.
Second?
Great. All those in favor, say yes.
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 All those opposed? Okay, we have a Facilities Committee. Thanks, everyone. Do we have any citizens' comments since the beginning? Okay, great. So that is the end of this meeting. It's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.